Hello and welcome to this episode of the Will Podcast. My guest today, I'm so happy to welcome Samorn Selim. Samorn is the founder of Career Unicorns and has been a dear colleague of mine for years now. And we can talk about how we met in a few minutes, and I'll give a full proper introduction. But Samorn and I were just talking about starting this episode with a little grounding, which is something I do on every call in my community and with clients. And Samorn said she invites her podcast guests if they want to do a little mindfulness grounding. And so I am summoning the courage to give this a try. Samorn, are you a yes to doing a little meditation? So, and if you're listening to this episode or watching the recording, I invite you to join along if you are not driving or operating heavy machinery.
Yes, please don't do that if you're driving or operating heavy machinery.
So I invite you to close or lower your eyes. I always like to put a hand on my heart, a hand on my belly, and just come back into my body and just remember that I am more than a brain being projected out into and through these devices. So I invite you to lengthen and deepen your breathing, or just even notice your breath. You don't have to do anything different. And then maybe notice your body, any amount. Maybe you feel yourself sitting up a little bit taller, or on the next inhale and exhale, you feel your shoulders relax and release any amount. And I just invite you to call your energy back into yourself from whatever you're doing, from being on a call, from rushing around, cooking dinner, whatever it is you're doing. Just take a brief pause and call your energy back into you, into this present moment. Beautiful. Whenever you're ready, I invite you to come on back, open up your eyes. How was that for you, Samorn?
Thank you, Elena. It was really nice. I love doing the mindfulness exercise. Typically for me, I do it before we record with the guest. And I think it's so helpful just to get us grounded because people are rushing from thing to thing. And when you can just hold that space, that allows you to come back to your body, reconnect with yourself, and just be present in the moment.
I love it. I do this on every call with clients, and I haven't had the courage yet to do it on the podcast. So let's give it a try. I know my own podcast listening behavior is like I'm listening on 1.5 speed. I'm trying to, maximize the consumption of content. And so I'll be curious, let me know what you think, listener, as we welcome Samorn to this conversation. And like I said, Samorn is the founder of Career Unicorns and the founder and host of the Career Unicorns Spark Your Joy podcast. And she's the daughter of illiterate Laotian refugees and the first in her family to go to college, and the former director of employer outreach at Berkeley Law. And Samorn has used her experience to help over 1,000 first-generation professionals, women, Black, Indigenous, people of color, land their dream jobs in tech and law and make their way professionally. And it's not just land the dream job, but it's inhabit really who they are in their roles and not give to burnout. So welcome.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Alina. I'm really excited to be here and chat with you. I was so excited to hear that you're launching your own podcast because I know it's been a dream of yours. And for me, it took me 5 years to launch mine. So I always welcome fellow podcasters.
Well, thank you so much. And I've been on Samorn's podcast, and it was a dream for about 5 years also. And I decided finally to stop beating myself up for not doing it. It's like that old, very annoying saying, like, when's the best time to plant a tree or start saving more money? It's like 20 years ago, right? And what's the second best time? Like today, right now. So I decided to just release my shame and my self-anger and say, hey, let's go. Take us into your legal journey and becoming a lawyer from your family. Tell us a little bit about your entry into that.
Oh, that's such a good question. Growing up with parents who didn't know how to speak English or read or write English and were traumatized by America's secret war in Laos during the Vietnam War and were forced to flee their country because they were facing persecution. It was really tough growing up in that environment. And on a daily basis, I face what I call injustices, where people just treated you poorly, where people looked down on you because you're on welfare and food stamps, and just that kind of disdain they have for you. And I experienced this throughout different parts of my life. And I was fortunate enough to graduate high school and been a counselor. You should think about college. And at the time, I didn't even know what it was. And I was graduating co-valedictorian. I turned in 4 applications 2 days or maybe a day before applications were due. And I was fortunate enough to get into all four. And I was able to get a ton of scholarships because I just applied to everything. $100, $200, it didn't matter. I just applied. And I was able to get into Berkeley for undergrad. And when I was in Berkeley, I got hit by an SUV when I was crossing street as a pedestrian. It was a traumatic, terrible experience because I couldn't walk. At the time, I was working 4 jobs, taking 20 units, volunteering with my community, and my entire life had to stop. And experiencing the legal system in a way where it felt so unjust. It also coincided that I took law in the Asian American community and got to meet Fred Korematsu, who is the named Japanese internment case here in San Francisco, and his lawyer, Don Tamaki, who later became a mentor. And they really inspired me to go to law school and to pursue my dreams and to fight for justice. And that's how I ended up going to law school. I went to Berkeley Law, and it really changed the trajectory of my life. I was able to be exposed to so many things. Like, I love consumer fraud and protection. So I interned at the FTC my first summer. I externed for Judge Chen, who now is on the Northern District of California as a federal judicial judge there. Then I also summered at Manat, Phelps and Phillips, and I started my career in big law at the height of the financial crisis. I graduated in 2009. So it was a really terrible time to start because everybody was getting their offers taken back. I was deferred for about 5 or 6 months. And you started your job with this huge amount of fear of, I'm lucky to get this job.
Yes, I've so observed that the trauma ripple from that in my clients. You know, you're lucky to have this job. Just how will I pay back my loans? It's such a mindset from that 2008, 2009, even 2010, a little bit, those classes.
Yeah. And it was so scary because right before I took the bar exam, literally a couple days before I was taking the California bar exam, and at the time it was 3 days, the firm called me and said, hey, by the way, one, we're going to reduce your salary by $15,000. And also, we usually give people 2 tries to take the bar exam. But this time, because the economy is so bad, we're only going to let you give 1 try. And if you don't pass, you're not going to have an offer.
Oh my God, I just had like a feeling in the pit of my stomach, like almost like throwing up. Like, how did that feel to you?
It was horrible, awful, and really scary. I felt so threatened, right? Because I had given up all the other opportunities I had to say yes to this firm. Because I had other opportunities, but I was like, okay, I'm going to go here. They're paying for my bar study, and I'm also going to be able to make a lot of money and pay off my student loans and help my family. And then I can move on to a different career if it's not a good fit, right? And also, the opportunity to work in big law is rare. So it was sort of like this huge privilege as somebody who grew up on welfare and food stamps, never even thought about going to college, to have this opportunity. So I was really grateful. But I will say that it was so stressful going in, and I was stressed out trying to pass this exam. And the year before me, our school had done the worst in its bar exam passage ever. So there was a lot of stress. And then what ended up happening was I was fortunate to pass, but almost all of my summer class did not. Out of all of us, only 3 of us started together that summer.
Oh my gosh. So then you have survivor's guilt too. On top of all of this, did you experience some of that? Like, oh my gosh. And like, I'm extra lucky. And I feel like the word grateful sometimes has this undercurrent of should. Like, I just should be so grateful. I am so lucky to be here. I shouldn't be here. Other people. Does that resonate for you at all?
Oh my God. And a lot of people said those things to me, and I felt that as well. Like, I felt so bad for the people that I knew that didn't pass and didn't have a chance. And it really, derailed them for a lot of their career. And they felt really bad, that kind of shame and guilt. And I did feel really grateful for having a job. It was a bad economy, and certainly felt so lucky to have a job that was paying me a lot of money, even though, again, the Friday before I started on Monday, they called me again and said they were going to reduce my salary by another 15,000. It was just a continuous, wow, where are we going with this? Oh no, it was actually more. Let me see. Yeah, it was a little bit more. It was a little bit more.
So those are the conditions in which you're going into big law. So then take us into your experience at the firm. It's your comfort level, whatever you're willing to share.
I've shared so much. I shared in my book, Belonging, Self-Love Lessons from a Workaholic, Depressed, Insomniac Lawyer. And I chronicle my time there. And I did not put the worst parts in there because I forgot some of it. And then it wasn't until I went to therapy that I realized, oh my gosh, there's so much more. But I did put a lot of the real stuff in there, including working for a older white male partner who every day would just berate me and open my door, slam my door, yell at me in front of people, humiliate me. There would be other women partners who, after this happened, would reach out and say like, hey, how are you feeling? And I would just say, oh, I'm fine. Like, because I didn't know I could even express. When I did try to express something, he would just shut it down so fast and make it seem like I'm wrong. And so, they're like, you should say something, da da da. So finally, I had the courage to say something.
You, the person with the least power, should say something. Another, aside from these female partners, yeah, I'm sorry you had that experience.
So then I did say something, and then I got blackballed. I went from being one of the highest billing associates, billing, 250 to 300 hours to zero for months. And it was a lesson that I learned that power is a real thing in the firm, and you will have people who allegedly are there to support you, but they're not there to help you and they do not have your back. And that if you do try to speak up, especially as the only Asian woman in the entire litigation group in San Francisco and only one of 2 people of color in that entire group, you will have severe, harsh pushback. And I was directly told during my mid-year review that I was lucky to have a job. If I had done this at any other firm, I would have been fired. And I believe that I was so ashamed. I put my head down, I worked hard, and I was able to get back on good graces because I ended up working for another partner who was even more powerful than the partner I had worked for that blackballed me. And then all of a sudden things changed. Like, we won this huge case that was a really tricky case. I was at it last minute and I found a way to change the game, and we actually won the case and was able to settle it for a lot of money. And so all of a sudden I became the golden child again. And I was like, mind you, nothing has changed. I'm still working 7 a.m. to 4 a.m. when I'm in trial. I'm still working 7 a.m. to midnight, Monday through Sunday when I'm not in trial. Nothing has changed for me. Actually, I even thought I worked less because I was like, no, I'm going to go to bed by midnight no matter what. That was me putting my foot down.
Like 7 a.m. to 4. So you were getting at maximum 3 hours of sleep.
Less because I had to go home and shower. They didn't have a shower there. So I would try to nap under my desk if there was a 10-minute break or 15-minute break. And we were in trial. So it was me, a senior associate, and that very abusive male partner. And every night we'd have 3 or 4 trial briefs. And, I was the primary drafter of our briefs. And then the senior associate would look at it. And then I was also the primary person prepping a lot of expert witnesses because I was the person who figured out our arguments for fiduciary duty and fiduciary fraud and all this other stuff. So it was really intense. It was way more work than a second year associate should be. We went to trial at the start of my second year. It was way more responsibility and work than a second year should have. But because the economy was bad and they laid everyone off, I had to do that work. And I didn't mind the work. I felt like I worked hard all my life and that was sort of something I had to do. But what I didn't appreciate was all the abusive behaviors. And at the time, I didn't realize they were abusive. I just thought this is just what it's like to work in big law. This is what it's like, like if your partner's mad and they throw papers on your desk and it almost hits your face, that's normal. If the partner comes in and slams the door and says, people who don't go to Ivy League undergrads don't know how to write, meaning me. And, it was just those kinds of demeaning things. And I think part of it was he went to a good law school, but my law school was ranked higher. And you know how it is hierarchical in the legal system. So I think he had a chip on his shoulder about that. So every day he would just tell me, if you didn't go to an Ivy League undergrad, you're dumb, you can't write, you can't do these things. But when I was summaring, I had worked for one of the managing partners and his review for me, and I have the paper.
You've saved the paper.
Not anymore, but back then I did. I'm over those dates. But he said, I'm impressed because you write like a 5th or a 6th year associate. You're getting a lot of mixed messages, right? Of you're good, you're not good. I've won all my cases. My clients love me. They buy me a dozen long stem roses. They bought me Hermes scarves. They give me red envelopes, And I thought that was also normal, but I found out later that is not normal in big law. Your clients do not like you. They do not send you gifts. So it was just a lot of not knowing and experiencing all of this and just trying to figure it out. And I think that's what inspired me to do the work that I do now, is that you don't have to endure everything that I endure. And you hear this on my own podcast. I start with, there's this myth that you have to pay your dues, and that simply isn't true. You don't have to go through abuse
You don't. I've seen that pattern also of juniors, first and second years just being totally dumped on and gaslit. It's one of the things that it was helpful to some of them being in the will community, like other seniors, lawyers, partners, counsel are like, no, it's not supposed to be like that. And as their career coach, who's not a lawyer, I can say that to them. But when they heard that from other lawyers, they're like, oh, and then it really can galvanize change. Tell us about how you got out of there.
I had a really bad moment. I was working late until like 9 p.m. and I hadn't had lunch, and the partner was upset that I wanted to go out to get lunch at 9 p.m. and he was throwing a hissy fit. And I had an incident with the security guard where somebody was bringing my food and they were like, we're not going to let them up. You have to come down and get this. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, you just called my office to just answer. Why not? And it got so bad where he yelled at me, and I normally do not yell at people, but I could not contain it. I just had enough. Everybody has been shitting on me for so much. I just had enough, and it just became a really huge thing. And I spent the next month just crying. I was like, I am a horrible human being. I have become one of these abusive people. And everybody was telling me, no, it's normal. You were stressed out, blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, this is not normal behavior, first of all. Second of all, I do not see this getting any better because I do not see my workload getting lighter. And I see that people are doing this around me and everybody's saying it's normal. And that is going to start changing my moral compass. And so I decided that I had to get out. And also being blackballed, I realized, okay, I don't want to have my life depend on one person or two people. So I started doing what I do now to help my clients, like getting clarity about my career. I started networking and I realized I really loved teaching undergrads, but I wasn't going to go back and get a PhD. The next best thing was, being a career counselor. You didn't need a PhD for that, but I get to do what I love, which is like supporting people and helping them with their careers and helping them to live better lives and be happy. And so I was told that I would never get a job in career counseling until I did at least 5 years of practice and had at least 2 years of experience counseling. And I'm like, where are you supposed to get counseling experience if you've never done it? And told that you'll probably have to move to the middle of nowhere because once a career counselor has their job, they never leave. I put together a panel called What I Wish I Had Known About OCI for my alma mater, Berkeley Law. And they had never done a summer program. They're like, oh, maybe 5 people will show up. I'm like, oh my God. Okay. 60 people showed up. They stayed for 3+ hours. They did not want to leave. And finally I had to tell them it's 9 p.m. We have to leave because we have not eaten. Our blood sugar is low. But it got such really good reviews. And it also happened to be that day my mentee sent me an email saying, like, by the way, Berkeley Law is hiring somebody to help with their boutique small and mid-sized firm. And so I joked with my then boss about like, hey, I heard you had this job. I know you're looking for somebody with 5 years experience, 2 years of counseling. I clearly don't have that, but call me in a few years. He actually came to the workshop and stayed until the end. And then at the end, he said, I have to leave before your Q&A starts, but call me on Monday and let's talk. And so I found out later that I beat out another career counselor who had 5 years of experience and 2 years of counseling experience, and was able to go there and really launch a whole bunch of programs. I launched their speed networking event. I launched their Women of Color Collective alumni event. It's called their Building Bridges event. I launched like a whole bunch of programs for the first generation professionals to support those students. And I love what I did. And I really love the impact that I had. And even though I wasn't supposed to counsel for big law, I ended up doing a lot of that work. So out of 230 students who participated, I counseled about 130 students, even though there were 8 career counselors. And I think a big part was, the students who didn't have the best grades, the students who were first gen, the students who were people of color, they wanted to work with me because I struggled through OCI and I had to figure it out. And because of that, I was able to use the same skills to help them with their interviews. And so our stats for the bottom third of the class went from, I think, 20% to 50% success rate in like the 2 months that I was there. And then it increased significantly after. And all of it was just confidence in the interview. Because if you go to a top 10 law school like Berkeley Law, you're going to get interviews. It's a lottery system, right? So you're always going to be guaranteed interviews no matter what, no matter your grades.
You don't have to land the interviews. You just have to nail it. And that's what you help people do. So you're having this huge success. I'm curious about like leaving the firm and leaving the prestige of the firm. So, I mean, you landed this amazing job that you created for yourself. But I mean, many of the women I work with struggle with the giving up the lawyer identity. Again, you yourself are a first gen. Your parents must have been very proud of you. I mean, all that prestige. What were some of the things you were telling yourself, like your internal dialogue, that helped you make that transition?
That's such a good question. I'm getting emotional because I remember calling my mom and telling her, like, this job is killing me. You know, when you grow up really poor, money is really important. And having a stable job is really important. And you finally get the fancy office with your name on the door on a gold plate, and you have an office that overlooks the Bay Bridge. Like, what more do you want in life? And my mom told me nothing is worth your life. So if this job is killing you, you should leave. And I was shocked because my mom is a really hard worker and she's lived through refugee camps for 5, 6 years. She cares a lot about money because, you know, we don't have enough. So you're barely making ends meet. You can't pay your bills. You can't buy food for your kids. That's a tough life. And for her to say, if it's killing you, you should leave was very profound. It wasn't that I needed permission from her to leave, but it was a relief to hear my mom say that. It was still hard to leave the prestige and the money and, you know, feeling like I've invested so much time going to undergrad, law school, you know, taking the bar exam, passing all of that. And the job at Berkeley, while it was a dream job for me because I love helping people, I was going to get paid a third of what I did at the firm. And I was going to have to commute 3 hours each day.
Wow. And this is before remote work too.
Yeah, it was a big sacrifice. I think losing myself by yelling at the security guard and having everybody else tell me that's normal and it's okay. Telling my mom that this is literally killing me because I was having back pain, chronic migraines, all this stuff. Because, you know, if you don't sleep, your body will break down. And the stress of having to deal with all these negative people, it really eats you up inside. You know, and at the time I was fortunate too. I had saved enough money to pay back almost all of my student loans. You know, because I was really frugal in law school. I worked almost the entire time I was in law school, and I was able to use that to pay for rent and pay for most of my bills. And I also got tuition reimbursement because I was a graduate student instructor. I just was able to build that into my life, was that, hey, I'm planning to work at this firm for about 2 years and give it my best shot. And I'm going to aggressively pay off all my debt while I can. And when I moved into my apartment, I didn't buy any new furniture. I had all these friends who bought new TVs, couches. I had hand-me-downs from my friends who graduated from law school. I still have that table at my house, by the way.
I like San Francisco, New York. Like I live in New York. You find stuff on the street.
No, I just have hand-me-downs from people. I'm like, it still looks nice. I was really clear. I read a lot of financial books because obviously if you ever grow up poor, you don't learn about money. So I read a bunch of financial books. I was like, I'm going to max out my retirement account. I'm going to pay off my student debt, the ones with the high interest rates, and then the ones that have a 2-point-something% interest rate, I can pay those later. I'm going to save money and not spend on all these, you know, things. I did enjoy life though. Like, for example, I, you know, ate at Michelin star restaurants every now and then. I went to the Maldives business class because I had miles. And so one of the benefits of traveling a lot and doing all this stuff.
I think we're all wired differently, right? But you're a maximizer. Like, you know how to maximize things. That's my hunch is it's nature, nurture, wherever it comes from. You built that muscle.
Yeah, I built that muscle and I was clear that I wanted freedom over anything else. And I was also lucky that I had other friends in big law who told me, you know, the golden handcuffs is really real. You know, they're like, don't buy a new car, don't buy all this new furniture, don't buy jewelry, just focus on, you know, having the freedom to leave if you need to. Because sometimes it's really good. And I work with a lot of clients who are in big law now who are on the partner track or have made partner and they're happy, but there's a lot of work that we do. But then, you know, I think if you're a woman and a person of color, and specifically an Asian woman, the odds are just against you. You know, less than 4% of CEOs in America are Asian women, right? It's just the numbers are so low and the expectations and the stereotypes, there's a lot of barriers that you really have to overcome. And so Asian female partners did sit me down and talk to me about this too. They're like, don't have kids right away. Don't buy these things. Do the work. See if you love it. See if the firm is a good fit. And then if it is, then, you know, make the financial decisions. But until then, try to have as much financial freedom as you can because you want the ability to walk away if it doesn't work for you.
So you got some great mentorship. You did your own homework and then you had the support from your mom to leave job. And thank you for sharing all of that and getting emotional. I cry all the time. I appreciate that.
It took me by surprise. I don't know why it took me by surprise. I hadn't thought about it in so long, you know, but it did take me by surprise. And it's something I write about in my book too, you know, that critical moment of all the confluence of events, right? Like things just lining up. And I think one of the things you have to do is pay attention.
Say more about that. And I'll make sure we link to your book in the show notes.
Paying attention, I think often we get signs that something isn't working and we are not willing to face it, or we think that we can work harder and then it will work itself out. But that's not the case. So I think the confluence of events of, my body breaking down, getting chronic migraines, yelling at the security guard, reporting this boss and then getting blackballed, and then this opportunity being available when everybody's like, it's never going to happen. That's the universe telling you, hey, it's time to get out. But also, I made the ask. There were other people who wanted this job, but they didn't make the ask. I made the ask. I made the joke with the then assistant dean. And then he's like, call me. It's a confluence of events. And I think one of the things that people want.
That means like, I've been getting them throughout, but it's always a sign of like, yes, that divine intervention. And you were listening, noticing those, what I call them, like it's your, straw that broke the camel's back moment or the effort moment. And you're like, wait a second, this confluence of events, I'm listening.
And seeing the opportunity when it's there. Sometimes we are so focused on all the problems, all the things that are going wrong, that when an opportunity hits you in the face, you don't even see it. And that's something I work with my clients a lot on, is like, hey, this isn't working for you. This is not where you want to be. Investing more time and energy into this is not going to get you where you want to go. What we need to do is we need to create space. We need to create your ability to be present and to be aware, so that when an opportunity comes to you, like a former mentee setting, she sent that job to me as a joke, by the way. It wasn't a serious thing. But then I was like, wait, this could be a serious thing. And even in my own mind, I didn't think it would happen right away. I thought in a few years, right? But then it happened.
It's also like the universe rewards the bold, like you're saying, see the opportunity and take the step, make the joke, lean in a little bit, put yourself out there. At Berkeley, you're doing this sort of dream job. Then what? Take us into how you've transitioned into your own career coaching world.
I found out that I was being severely underpaid. There was another opportunity at another school and they were paying more. So I asked them if they would give me a raise and they said no. And so I went to the other job and I ended up at UC Hastings, which is now UC San Francisco Law. I'm very confused by the name because I thought it's confusing with UCSF, the medical school. At any rate, I don't know how they figured out that trademark issue. But that as an aside, I ended up going there to work. And then I realized that I loved what I did there. I launched the Board of Governors program, and it was considered one of the most successful mentorship programs. And I helped so many students, like hundreds of students, get jobs after they graduated. The opportunities at Hastings were just different for folks there than Berkeley, right? They didn't have as many people coming on campus to recruit, et cetera. And they had fallen pretty severely in the rankings. And so being able to help them get back to being in the top tier school and top 50 because of the employment rates, all this stuff was really important. But it was a very intense job because I was responsible for 3Ls, which was over 300 students. I was responsible for the recent grads, which was another 300 students. And then I was responsible for all alums. And it was just too much of a caseload. There were 6 or 7 counselors, but they all had different specialties. And for some reason, my caseload was just huge, and at the time, there were just a lot of people who were graduated without jobs because of the economy. And so while I loved my job, and again, I loved helping students to be able to land their dream jobs, whether it's in big law, at in-house companies, or in, the PD or DA's office, it just was so intense. And I didn't feel like I could keep up the pace without breaking down again physically.
Right. It's a lot. That big law training, you take it with you when you go to the next place.
Right. Like when I was at Berkeley, I hopped on a call with a student at 11 p.m. and she was like, why are you taking my call so late? And I said, honestly, it's because this is the only slot I have available before you have to go do your interviews.
We'll get into boundary setting.
Yeah, boundary setting. But that's something I teach my clients too. It's like, hey, you think you leave this job, you're not going to have these habits. No, you got to work on yourself too. And so I realized that there wasn't going to be more support, and the amount of support that it requires to help somebody be successful in landing their jobs was not something that I could fully commit to because there were just too many people. So people in the past think you can just meet with a student for one meeting, one 30-minute meeting, and then they'll be fine. That is not the situation in the new economy or the economy we're seeing right now, right? You cannot just meet with somebody once and think that if you did one mock interview or one session, they're going to be able to land their job now. It's just not how it works. And so I think trying to make administrators and professors who've never had jobs, who were the top 10 in their class, not even top 10%, like the top 10 in their class, who have clerked for Supreme Court judges, to understand the job market and why we need more support was a losing battle in both administrations, by the way. I was like, they just didn't get it, like they don't get how hard it is if you weren't the top of your class, if you don't have a professor making a phone call for you saying, this is my top student, they should have a job, that the job market has changed. And then the other thing they didn't get was that people had a lot of student loans and they're seriously stressed out. And they're like, I don't understand why we're talking about student loans so much. When I went to law school, it was $500. I'm like, excuse me, it's $50,000 just for tuition, not including housing, books.
Let's bring gender and race in. Like, they're probably white men, right? Who may have had familial support or a wife taking care of everything at home while they built their careers. So there's so many layers to that too. All right. So you were fighting the system, not able to change it significantly from it. And how did you decide to go out on your own?
It's such a funny story. I did not think I was going to build my own business. But what happened was I was invited to speak on how to convert your interviews into offers by a bunch of bar association events. And I was just doing it for free. I'm like, yeah, I'll go and teach. And what was miraculous was it wasn't the students that came up to me after the workshop. It was the lawyers. And they said, oh, I want to work with you. How much do you charge? And I was like, I don't charge anything. I've been helping people for free. And I love it so much that I was helping people outside of Berkeley for free, just for fun. And then I thought to myself, well, maybe I can charge something. And so that's how it started. So I started charging for that.
I think as a career coach, I think this is important. That's one of the clues of what would you do for free? Right? What do you love so much that you're like, oh, wait, I've been doing this for free. And wait, I could get paid for it. So that's taking that moment to listen also. And I think that's available to everyone. Dial in, what would I do for free every day? What do I love so much? It's just a great question. It doesn't mean you have to do it. It's a place to mine for some information.
Yeah, because whatever it is that you love to do, there's probably a way for you to do it and get paid. I don't think you have to monetize everything you love, but I think there are some things where you just are naturally good at it. You can help people and do good in the world, and you can get paid and get paid well for it. So I started doing that. And in my first year of doing that, where I was working about 5 hours on the side every week, I made more money in my business than I did at the law school. So then it came to a breaking point where I was like, hey, do you want to keep being here? And I was within 1 year of getting the pension at UC. You have to work there for 5 years to get your pension. And everybody was telling me, just stick it out. I just got to a place where I don't want to. There were many wonderful people that I worked with, and I loved working with the students, but I don't want to work in a place where staff is treated so poorly and denigrated. When you work in a university, what you don't realize is that professors are gods, then it's the alumni because they donate money, and then it's the students, and then staff is the lowliest of the lowliest. And so, the indignities that you face in big law as a person of color, an Asian woman, and first-year associate, or even worse indignities you face in the law school from people looking at you in a certain way. And so I think that I don't usually let other people bother me or impact me very much, because if I did, I wouldn't have gotten to where I am in life. But I also didn't want to be in an environment where that kind of behavior was seen as okay.
Yeah, that's a theme for you, for sure. Right? Of I don't want to be in this environment where yelling at the security guard is considered okay and normal because I'm somehow more important than he is. And I'm allowed because I'm under so much stress. I don't want to be in an environment where I'm not and others are not really being treated in an equitable way. So I see that as a theme for you. And these themes also are important as dear listener, as you're figuring out your journey. What are those threads of your values, of what's important to you? And I recently commented on one of your LinkedIn posts about it's an inside job to figure out job changing, career change, job search. It's actually starts as an internal job of like, what is important to you? What does light you up? What are your strengths and skills and talents that you love to do? And I love what you said. It doesn't mean like because you love animals, you have to go make your career in an animal shelter, but it's just like, oh, what do you love? So tell us like about your business now and how you help people and what you love in that.
Yeah, I really love my business because I think our mission is to help people build fulfilling lives and careers. And I focus primarily working with women, Black, Indigenous, Asian, Latinos, and first generation professionals. And the idea is that before we start looking at opportunities, we go inside. We really help you clarify your interests and your passions, and we do an in-depth assessment at the beginning. And then once we realize that, then we can go look for what the ideal roles are. And then we help you throughout the entire process of rebranding your resume, rebranding your LinkedIn, especially if you're trying to make a pivot. A lot of times you're writing about what you're doing now and it doesn't make as much sense. Like, for example, when I was transitioning from being a lawyer to being a career counselor, the things that were most important were the fact that I had taught undergrads and I knew how to motivate students. I had been a mentor in so many programs. I launched a couple of mentorship programs myself. And so those are the most relevant things, not being in trial as a second year associate, which is impressive as a lawyer, but not necessarily relevant.
Right. You want to translate those skills into the thing that you want to do.
Yeah. So I was working with a man who is a Black man, and his name is Jamin. I can say that because he's on my podcast. And he was at a point where he had a joint JD MBA and he thought about quitting law entirely. Even had an offer, but then it was taken away. So we were like, then he reached out to me to be like, hey, what should I do? And so we were able to help him get clarity. And he talks about this on the podcast that he loved sports, but he told everybody, I'm not doing sports anymore. I give up. And his family was just like, what are you talking about? And we were able to identify that he loved sports. And he's like, well, but I can't be a basketball player. I'm older. Da, da, da. And I was like, yeah, you don't have to be. But how do we meld the things that you love about your work? And he loved making deals happen. So we were able to help him land a role at the Major League Soccer and get a senior role, even though he didn't have quite the amount of experience that we're looking for. But because we trained him and did the mock interview so well to show his transferable skills and to show that he can handle complex issues, he was able to get the senior role. And we also help him negotiate a very, very substantial offer.
What a beautiful smile. You are beaming as you tell this story. It's really beautiful.
But it was truly amazing because, I caught up with him and he said he went on vacation to South Africa. And for the first time, he didn't have to respond to any emails or messages.
Isn't that amazing? I work with a woman who is in her late 50s, maybe, or I think she's in her early 60s actually. And she went on 2 yoga retreats this year. And it was the first time in 36 years she didn't take a laptop. She didn't take work with her on vacation.
I highly recommend not taking your laptop with you on vacation.
Right. But that kind of freedom of like being in a right fit place, of having the internal boundaries to not check your email, to not respond when you're on vacation. It's both, right? It's being in the right fit culture where that's not expected of you. We all have these devices that I believe we're all addicted to. And that's a whole other conversation. It's on my mind a lot, but another day. But then really doing that. Can you talk a little bit about, boundary setting? I'd like to go there.
I think first, you do have to have an environment that allows for boundaries. And I think one of the things that's really difficult when people give advice to folks who are in big law or other places where there are no boundaries is set boundaries. That doesn't work. If the culture expects you to be responsive 24/7, and that's what I experienced, it's not possible to do that. But if you are in an environment, I work with a lot of people who are trying to make partners. I tell them, you need to set the culture. So you need to be clear with your team that, you do not expect them to respond from 12 to 8 a.m. unless there is a closing for a deal. That's a little different because, when you have to close for a deal, all hands on deck for 24 hours. It is what it is. But that should not be the norm, right? And what I teach my leaders is do not send emails or Slack messages unless it's absolutely crucial. And if you feel like that's when I work, schedule send. It's important for you as a leader to set the culture. On the other end, on the individual end, it's, if you tell people I have this boundary, let's say I have this client who is a mom and she has to go pick up her kids at a certain time at 5. The school doesn't wait for you. And she says, but inevitably almost every single day, somebody will stop her at 5 and then she has to sit there. And I said, I understand the desire to want to be there all the time. At the same time, you've already told everybody what your boundary is. And by not sticking to the boundary, unless it's an absolute emergency. And there's really usually no real absolute emergency where they can't wait 30 minutes, right? Then what you're teaching everyone else is that it's not a real boundary. So what would it mean to just, and I think part of it was she just didn't have the right tools to address it. And I said, we need to practice it. So if somebody does come up to you and say this, just let them know, I love to chat with you. I really appreciate it. I have to pick up my kids because they are off at this time. I will be online again in 30 minutes. So can you just send me a message via email to let me know what the situation is? And then I can hop on a call with you once, I drop on my kids, or I can hop on a call with you while I'm driving to pick up the kids. But there's lots of different ways.
Or after 8 o'clock tonight, whatever the boundary is, right? And I think there's one of the things, and I love that you said it is a practice. It is such a practice. And that's exactly the boundary setting framework I teach. Essentially, it's like saying yes to going to pick up my kid and not being late to my kid and my kid's school. Right.
Right.
And then saying, no, I can't talk right now. And then saying, yes, can we do it later?
Yeah. And if you don't like no, you could just say, yes, I love to talk. I'm on my way to pick up my kids. And how about 6 o'clock? Or how about 7 o'clock?
Exactly. I totally am with everything you said. It is about being in a culture that doesn't expect 100% 24/7 always availability. It is about that internal boundary setting, and it is about developing those skills as a practice. No one gets it right the first time. I call it now like boundary practice instead of boundary setting, because it's just like, okay, sometimes you're going to swing and miss, and sometimes you're going to get a first base, hit and get on base, and that's fine too.
I think you also have to be really clear about what your boundaries are and what season you are in life. For example, when I started in big law, I didn't mind working 7 a.m. to midnight. I wanted to work a lot. I wanted to learn a lot. I wanted to get as much experience as I could. I felt like I was behind because I didn't grow up in private schools and was prepped this entire time. I didn't have parents who were lawyers. So I knew I had a lot to learn. Now in the season of my life where I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, no, thank you. Like I don't have meetings after 2 p.m. because my kids come home after 2 p.m. And unless it's a one-off here or there, generally I don't have anything scheduled in the afternoon because that's when my kids are here, right? I don't do any speaking engagements that require me to travel. I don't travel unless it's a speaking engagement in SF or it's on Zoom or online. If it's going to require me to be away for the weekend or do something like that, I just say no to the opportunity. And I know not everybody has the privilege to do that, but I think it's really important to get clear about what are your priorities, what are your values, and what are the behaviors you have to implement to be aligned with those things.
Chef's kiss. Well said. So beautiful. So I think this is a great moment to sort of wrap up and really celebrate where you have landed. I mean, what you just said, you're in this season of life, you're raising a young family, you've created a career that works for you and your life. You get to help people. It's aligned with your values. What's like a final thing you might want to, or something you might want to say to your younger self from where you are now?
That's such a good question. I would say this to my younger self and my present self too, which is that the most important thing is that you take care of your physical, mental, and emotional health. And if you do those things, everything else will align and you will have more capacity to do all the things that you dream of, including wanting to support your family or support your clients or support your community when you are well. And I wanted to share that I was late diagnosed with bipolar 2. And I think a big reason I was late diagnosed with bipolar 2 is because the law firm job was so crushing. And it was the first time in my life where I didn't get sleep. And so it triggered a bunch of things because my illness is triggered by a lack of sleep. And so one of the things I really protect now is getting my sleep. I'm not going to be responding to phone calls or emails at 4 a.m., even if a partner is yelling at me, because my mental health is worth more than that. But when you're young and you're starting out, you don't realize that because you don't realize that your mental and physical health can just flip and it will change your life. So that's the one message I want to give to everybody is really protect your physical, mental, emotional well-being and do the things that you need to take care of yourself. If you're working in a firm, and I work with a lot of clients who are, I just tell them, look, the priority is, 7 to 8 hours of sleep, maybe 30 minutes of walking, a couple deep breaths, and then you got your job and your family, because that's actually all you have capacity for. The job is really demanding. So you have to be realistic about what's on your plate and what you need to say no to and what you really need to prioritize, your health.
Oh, Samorn, we could talk for hours.
I know.
And we will. More to be continued for sure. What's the best way for people to find you?
Yeah, people can follow my work on LinkedIn. You can just search for Samorn Selim. And then if they want to listen to more episodes like this, I interview a lot of people on my podcast who've had different careers and we share their stories. So it's basically I do the networking for you and you can just listen in. The podcast called Career Unicorn Spark Your Joy. You can listen to it on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you listen to your podcast. And if folks are interested in learning more about how we can partner together through one-on-one coaching or a hybrid group coaching with one-on-one support, they can just reach out to me on careerunicorns.com. They can send a message and then my assistant Matt will send them follow up on how we can talk about a 30-minute free consult to see if it makes sense to partner together. I work primarily with women, Black, Indigenous, Asian, Latinos, and first generation professionals who are in law or in tech and legal tech. That's, the specialty area that I have. And I support people from all stages, to 2 years into becoming COs, CTOs, VPs. So it's a really fun ride. And I think for anybody out there who's in a job that they're not feeling that happy about, or they're feeling stuck and frustrated, to know that there is a better place for you. It will require dedicated time and work, but if you are consistent, you can get there. So never give up on your dreams.
Thank you so much, Samorn, for coming and sharing just some of your stories with us and some of your experiences. I so appreciate everything. Go seek Samorn if you want to go further in getting to know her and working with her. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Will Podcast.
And thank you for having me, Elena. It's been a pleasure.
Such a pleasure. Okay, bye.